Welcome to the Mindset Gym podcast, where we exercise your way of thinking to help unlock your hidden potential. I'm your host, Emily Irwin, a registered nurse and holistic nutritionist with a passion for all things health, fitness, and personal development. All right, let's get into it. Hi guys, welcome back to the Mindset Gym podcast. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, you can already tell that this is going to be a really exciting episode. For the first time since this podcast has launched, we have a guest joining me on the episode today. So I am joined by David Appelson. He is a content creator, an endurance athlete, a mentor for fitness creators, and the creator of a social media brand by the name of Butterchops that shares a ton of motivational and relatable content around topics such as self-love, personal development, fitness and nutrition, and building community. So David, welcome to the show.
What an intro. I hope I can live up to it.
So David and I connected a while back on Instagram. We are both pretty heavily involved in the health and fitness space. So I would love for you to start by just telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what your journey with health and fitness has been like.
Traumatic. I'll start there because as a child growing up, the guidance, I don't want to be the guy who blames his parents. And mom and dad, if you listen to this, I love you. Growing up, it was challenging. Like my mom, she was never out of shape really. However, like if we wanted Burger King, we got Burger King, right? So there wasn't that much guidance growing up around health and fitness. Both me and my sister grew up mostly overweight, and we've both gone through our own personal struggles of really having to figure it out. My dad wasn't an athlete. My mom wasn't an athlete, so to speak. So I did all the bad things you're not supposed to do. Think tuna diet, like eating tuna for 2 weeks, which technically in theory could work, but the problem is it's not sustainable because you're not going to eat tuna every day the rest of your life, right? And all the crash diets, like you name it, I did it. Which, looking back, really tremendously helped me, right? Because I figured things out along the way, not the right way. Not by taking stackers that have like 2,000 milligrams of caffeine in it. Of course that's going to make you lose weight, but it's also going to jeopardize your health. So doing all of those things and making so many mistakes along the way really set the foundation for me for when I hit 30 years old. And we can backtrack if you have any questions about some of that history. I'd love to get into it if we have time, but at 30 years old, I was in a relationship. My son was on the way. I've done the ups and downs of gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, succeeding for 6 months, gaining it all back. And then I stepped on the scale one day. I was 305 pounds. I'm like, a question popped in my head. And it was like, how does this story end? And it's weird because when you get a question like that, and if you ever ask yourself any questions, if you ever ask anybody else a question, by the way, they're almost forced to think of the answer. And you, if you ask yourself questions, are forced to think of an answer. And that just happened to be the question that happened to pop into my mind that day. And that was the very question that changed everything for me. Because it led me down a path of understanding myself and saying, dude, if you're going to do this, you got to do it for life. And dude, if you're going to do this, you're going to be overweight for quite some time. And you have to be okay with that. Because all of that other stuff didn't work, right? It wasn't sustainable, and you hear it all the time. If it's not sustainable, it's not attainable. So I made a conscious decision that day that if I'm going to do it, it's literally a light switch. You're doing it for life. You're taking it slow. You're not doing anything the fast way, and you just take it one day at a time. So here I am, 9 years later, almost 9 years later.
I can definitely relate to not growing up around that really structured kind of health and fitness lifestyle and really having to figure it out. I've definitely done my fair share of crash diets along the way too, things that are certainly not sustainable. I think I tried the watermelon diet at one point. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but any of these things where we're picking one thing and just sticking to it and nothing else, there's no sustainability there. So yeah, I was wondering, because looking over your journey on social media, there has been a pretty substantial weight loss over your journey. And so that moment that you talk about where you were standing on the scale and asking yourself, what does my future look like? Would you say that that was kind of a turning point for you when things really clicked over the long term, or was there any other aspects that really solidified things for you and made it easier to really dive feet first into this journey and stick to it over the long term?
When you've accumulated so much pain over time, you have all the fuel you need. And most people already have all the fuel they need. We've all been through some things. I mean, you could tell your story with some other person and they'll tell you a more traumatic story. And you'll be like, oh my God, they went through that, right? And then you'll tell your story to somebody else and they haven't gone nearly as much as you've gone through, right? But the magic lies in you comparing you to you, which I know people say all the time and is so kind of cliche. However, if you don't really embody that you versus you mindset, it really becomes a struggle. Because there's always going to be someone in better shape, more money, better looking. There's also someone who's going to be the lesser of those things to you, right? So the only thing you can really do is if you change your mindset around how you view others' success. Not as, oh, why don't I have that? But more like, that's really cool. I can't believe they did that. That's awesome. Like, you celebrate other success, that can also give you fuel. So a combination of all your pains, your struggles, your I never want to be back here again. Sometimes you have to hit the worst of the worst for that to happen. For me, I'm so happy I chose to make that my rock bottom. I didn't allow a new rock bottom to be created. I didn't have any medical issues yet. But at 305 pounds, it's only a matter of time before I slip, fall, and get diabetes, right? So at the end of the day, it's really important that when you take a look at your journey today, you get to write your story. You choose your starting point. If you want to delay it 6 months, by all means. But at some point, you have to make a conscious decision that this is my turning point. I just try to encourage people and inspire people not to wait that long before it's something really, truly debilitating.
I love what you said about, you get to choose what your rock bottom is, because you're right. As someone who was on that kind of trajectory, there are several number of quote unquote rock bottoms you could have hit further down that path, but you made the choice to say, this is it. This is where I'm done being in this position. I'm done feeling this way. And I couldn't agree more that it's so important to compare yourself to who you were the day before or the week before or the year before, as opposed to comparing yourself to everybody else, because it's so easy to get stuck feeling like, well, why am I not where this person is, or why am I not doing what this person's doing? And it can feel like you're not making the progress that you want to make or not moving fast enough. And I think we hit a lot of struggles like that mentally and physically along our journey. What would you say over the course of your health and fitness journey has been the biggest obstacle for you?
I think, that's such a good question because there's so many ways I can go with it. But as you grow up, I think we all have different types of insecurities that develop and different ways where we compensate for it. I think a lot of my sense of humor came from humiliating myself in front of others so other people wouldn't bully me, right? And you or being shorter than I would like to be, right? We all, and I'm not saying like people that are a certain height always have it easy. That's not far from the truth. However, I think that when we're dealt a certain type of cards, it's almost kind of like our own evolution over time. We try to fill in our own gaps of survival with certain types of skills that help us be more social or be more athletic. We play to our environment at times, and I think that once you get into your 20s and your 30s, you've made plenty of mistakes up to that point. For me, being in my 30s was like just a culmination of, okay, I made all these mistakes. I also made all of these successes. Like, now it's time to really demand better of myself and decide what's right for me. What should I really care about? Who should I involve in my life? And I think that anybody needs to continue to have those continuous self-assessments to decide, how are you going to live your life? Because it's not the destination that's going to fulfill you. Because if you're just waiting for that last thing, that last goal to hit, you're just going to be waiting. And that entire time, even if you get there and that point makes you happy, that means that that entire time you spent to get to that point maybe wasn't so fulfilling. So it's really important to create the life that you want and not wait for the thing that you want. You're creating the life in achieving the thing that you want. So that way you actually literally enjoy each day and things don't feel like a chore. Fitness felt like a chore to me in the past. And part of my platform now is making it fun and inviting.
Yeah, and I think you make such a good point around having the right mindset going into something like this can make a world of difference, because if it is just focusing on the end goal and making that the only thing that you're going to allow yourself to enjoy, instead of enjoying all these small steps along the way and learning to actually love the process of what you're doing, it can feel like this thing that you're just kind of grinding your teeth and white knuckling through, and it's really not all that fun, and it's not sustainable when that's how you feel going into things. If you were to talk to somebody who, let's say, was just starting out, was at that moment where you were kind of standing on that scale years ago, at that kind of rock bottom starting point moment, what would be your advice to somebody starting out their fitness journey?
Well, the trouble with answering that question is everybody hears information differently. So there's going to be very different people listening to this podcast. And 50% may resonate with everything I say, and 50% nothing hits. But you say the exact same thing, and they're like, I connect with her because of her journey and what she's been through and what she's done. So I think that's why there's space for everyone to be successful, because sometimes people just connect differently to other people, and it could just be one or two words that makes all the difference. What I would say is find the people that inspire you and motivate you. Get rid of all the trash on your feed. Start to consider who you're surrounding yourself with. Are they bringing you up? Are they encouraging you? Are you not? Some of those, you have choices to make that are extremely difficult choices to make. Could be friends, could be family members, God forbid, right? But sometimes you got to make those difficult choices, because what you consume and what you're around is going to influence you. And I will tell you from experience, I was never a runner, and I'm sure maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later, but in my journey, somewhere along the way, I was like, oh, I'm doing a 23-minute mile, and I would whittle it down over time to the point to where I got the courage to join a running group. And when you're in a running group and all they talk about is, I'm running a 50-mile race, I'm going to London to run this marathon, I'm running a marathon in 7 continents. And you hear that all the time. It's not that you want to run a marathon in 7 continents, but you might do a half. That's what happened to me. So when you surround yourself with people that do hard things, that's a great first step, because you're surrounding yourself with content, information that's going to support you and encourage you and motivate you. And that motivation becomes the tinder on your flame to get started. And then once you get started, which is the hardest part, and you take that first small step, all you need to do is just keep blowing on that flame.
I think that's such good advice, and I think it's something that we often forget going into a journey where we are changing a lot of our habits and changing how we show up, that it doesn't just impact those things in that box. It has a trickle-down effect to everything else in your life, who you interact with, what you engage with. And you're right, shifting those things in your life to help kind of foster that growth environment and support you along the way instead of making it more challenging is a really important shift to make. One thing that I think gets maybe underrepresented in terms of people's health and fitness journeys is the mental aspect. We see a lot of growth, physically. There's a lot of physical changes that happen with years and years of putting in the work and doing all these things to change our habits and take care of ourselves. Have you noticed any changes to your mental well-being over the years of your journey?
I'd also love to hear your thoughts about this after I share my thoughts, because I'd love to ask you the same question as well, because I know you're super knowledgeable about this topic, and you've talked a lot about it too. I would say it, again, cliches are a cliche for a reason, people, right? Because it makes sense. It starts in the mind, right? If we go back to my earlier conversation, my points where I was stepping on the scale, right? The question started in the mind. It didn't start in the body. Yeah, my body got on the scale, but it was my mind that asked the question. So you have to start in the mind. To tell you how much mental work I did, it would be insane. But I will tell you this: affirmations, meditation, gratitude, really structuring my morning through daily reminders. I would set Google Tasks on my phone to remind me of things every single day. 6 a.m., boop, 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 bunch of reminders of things, qualities I want to embody, things I should remember, drink enough water, make sure you get 10,000 steps today. All the things that, and by the way, that's over time, right? I master one thing, I added another reminder. So the mental work is what leads the physical. You'll get to a point to where the physical will lead the mental, but it starts in the mind, and then it starts to feed each other, typically. Because your mind is what's going to make the body go. So even if you're like, oh, I'm going to start with a walk, right? It's your mind that led that decision. But eventually, through muscle memory and just your body will need it and feel it and want to move. And then that can start to back you up when the mind can't. But you have to start with the mind and do the work. So I want to flip the question to you. How would you answer that?
So I would say there's maybe two big shifts that I found over the course of my fitness journey in terms of my mental health and just how I show up to the world. And I think you're right. The first one that you talked about, where your mindset going into things is going to have such a big impact on how you show up, and your mindset kind of drives your actions at the very beginning. And I would say starting out my fitness journey, I was definitely coming from a place of self-hatred and not really liking where I was and wanting to maybe punish myself for the weight that I was and how I looked. And so the way that I was showing up and doing these things, I was almost kind of bullying myself into doing it and white-knuckling myself through the whole thing. And so something that I really had to work on along the course of this journey, with things like you mentioned, like meditation, affirmations, just leaning a little bit more into self-love and how I talk to myself and being a lot more mindful of those things. Over time, the shift in mindset from approaching things from a lens of self-hatred to approaching it from a lens of self-love and respect for myself and care for myself and wanting to do these things because I know it's what's right for me long term and I know it's what's going to make me feel better. It ended up making the way that I approach my fitness journey feel so much different. It didn't feel like this thing that I was just white-knuckling through and suffering through to get to some end goal. It was something that I was appreciating and enjoying a lot more in the moment. And I think the second thing that has come out of this journey mentally over the long term has just been a shift in confidence. The constant routine of showing up and doing these things, even though they're hard, even though I don't always feel like doing them, and pushing my limits in the gym, showing myself what I'm capable of, even though maybe going into it initially it's not something that I thought I could do. It unlocks this level of confidence that I don't think I'd ever been able to tap into before, because looking at other aspects of my life, that has translated into an increased belief in my ability to tackle new things.
What was your, I know I talked about my rock bottom, and I know you have some questions for me, but you talk about self-hatred. Well, self-hatred starts somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Where was that? I'm sure people can relate to your journey too. What was that point to where you realized, nobody wants to hate themselves, right? Or nobody wants to talk negatively to themselves. However, what was that moment of awareness for you?
Yeah, so when I started my fitness journey, it wasn't initially out of kind of that rock bottom moment. I think I hit it a couple of years later. So I started working out because my roommates in university had kind of encouraged me to start going to the gym with them. And that got me into working out. That was kind of my introduction to doing any sort of regular exercise, to paying any sort of attention to my diet. And years prior to that, when I was in high school, I had struggled off and on with bulimia and had kind of gotten it under control. And it wasn't an issue at the time. And then I started working out regularly, paying a little bit more attention to my diet, and it kind of spiraled this pattern out of control in a way that I really hadn't experienced before. And all of my actions, like I said, were kind of driven from a place of not liking what I look like and needing to be thinner, needing to be smaller, needing to fit some standard. And so my habits were getting less and less focused on health and more focused on this perfectionist ideal of what I thought I should look like. And I would say my kind of rock bottom moment was a few years into that journey where the bulimia had kind of gotten ahead of me a lot. And it was such a big part of my day. It was constantly on my mind, thinking about food, thinking about what I can and can't eat, the binging and purging and all of this stuff. It really took over my entire life. And it got to a point where it was having such a massive impact on my health that I really couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I think that kind of big turning point for me was, and if you're listening to this episode, if you're not into like gory details, skip ahead a couple of minutes. I started throwing up blood on a pretty regular basis, and that was a really scary, like, oh shit, this is having a bigger impact on my health than I had anticipated. And so it was right around that point where I kind of said to myself, this is not sustainable. This is not something you can keep doing. Kind of like you did, you know, like, what is this going to look like if I keep up this pattern over the long term? What's going to happen to my health? And so it was at that point that I was like, you need to start changing your perspective, approaching this from a place of looking after yourself and looking after your health, and stop chasing this goal of you needing to look a certain way. And so that was when I kind of shifted into strength training and shifted into paying more attention to my diet from a health standpoint, and that really shifted things to where I am now.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you've shared that story before on your Instagram or on social, but you know, I just think it's so powerful. And I'm not smiling because of the story, because obviously the story has trauma in it, but I'm smiling because of the courage that it takes to share a story like that, and the fact that you've developed the mental strength and resilience and toughness to be able to just say that story, just like, I have no problem sharing it, because no one's able to just do that, right? If they're just coming out of the journey or they're really in the thick of it. That is just proof right there, no matter what, that you put in that mental work to be able to have the courage, that you've come so far through your journey that you can just do that. So that's extremely impressive and a testament to your growth.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I would agree. This is definitely not something that I was able to talk about openly right out of the gate, especially not when I was in the thick of it. Not many people knew what was happening when it was happening, because there's so much shame around
For sure.
being in the middle of all of that when you're in the middle of it. And so it took me years to kind of come to terms with what it was, accept what it was, accept where I am now, and speak about it a little bit more openly. And yeah, I think this might be the first time, at least on my podcast, that I've talked about it in so much detail.
Well, thank you. I feel honored, so I really appreciate it.
So yeah, I guess while we're on the topic of self-love, this is a topic that you talk about quite a bit on your social media, is the importance of self-love and leaning into it and using that kind of as an avenue for personal growth. Do you have any advice for someone who is maybe starting out and is struggling from that perspective and is having a really hard time with self-love and acceptance?
It can be hard to... You're probably going to laugh. Okay, I shouldn't say it can be hard, because just by me saying it can be hard makes it harder. The words we choose matter, right? So I personally, at this point, I'm very conscious of the words that I use. So if I say it can be hard, I don't actually, at this point in my life, believe it can be hard, but I know to communicate with people that aren't there yet, I have to use that word, right? Because truly, if you tell yourself something's going to be hard, you make it harder. If you say, let me lean into this, maybe it'll be easy, let me give it a shot. The words we choose matter and can help open that door. The more we remind ourselves that something's hard, the more hard it can become. So when we talk about self-love, and we say we can be hard on ourselves, true, right? The key is to notice it, be aware of it. And what meditation can teach us is how to view our thoughts. So some people think meditation, it's not for me, it's a little floozy. Okay, fine. Like, I get it. There's a lot of different paths to get to somewhere. Meditation, what it meant for me, just like we train our bodies, which is great, the body and the mind, and the way we view our mind and the way we view our bodies starts with awareness. We have to be aware of how we feel. We have to be aware of what's going on in our mind. What meditation allows us to do is to close our eyes, shut out all the information, because our brains are like computers. We have all this information. We're looking at all these things. We're over-consuming. So because we're processing so much information at one time, we got to close our eyes, and then it's just us. It's us, our brain, and our thoughts, and there's a vulnerability in that. But when you do that, and you breathe, and you start to just be there, and just see, like you're sitting on the side of, this is what I always visualize, it's kind of corny, but I like it. I sit on the side of some river, there are leaves on the river flowing by, and I'm just sitting there, like Indian style, just looking into the brook, and there's just leaves going by. And the leaves to me represent my thoughts. You just sit there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes if I have a lot of time, maybe 15 minutes on another day, whatever, right? But most of the time it's just 5 minutes. And I'm not going to name any brands. There's plenty of apps out there that do it, right? You just watch your thoughts go by. And what that allows you to do is it's training your brain, just like you're training your muscles, to be aware of the thoughts that you think on a regular basis. If you do that enough, you're training your brain to be aware of your thoughts. Once you can do that, then once you open your eyes, you now have another kind of neural connection going that allows you to be aware of what you're saying on a daily basis, even when your eyes are open, even when you're at work and a coworker is driving you nuts. It allows you to be aware of the things you think. When you're driving, you don't have to react when a driver cuts you off, right? It's those kind of things that allow you to start to build the life you actually want, to be aware of the thoughts that pop in your mind and choose a different path. And then it's just reps. Just like lifting weights. You do that every single day, you will change over time. However, it starts with being aware and purposely trying every day, being aware of how you react in situations, or at least reflecting after you've already reacted, right? Revisionist history. You can rewrite your story the next time something happens, and being patient with that process.
I love that. It's funny that you mentioned sitting by the river and this passing leaves, because I actually do something similar. So when I'm meditating, I actually imagine myself like lying on this big open desert full of sand, and I'm looking up at the stars, and they're kind of my like visualization of my
I like that as
thoughts.
well. That's a good
yeah,
one.
so we have kind of a similar approach, and you make such a good point. It's so helpful to have a mindset that, your thoughts are not everything. They are not your identity. They are just a passing thing. And so that ability to see it, be aware of it, and then decide what you want to do with it is massive in how you show up in the world, because you're not just reacting to every single thing that pops up into your head. You can take a much more mindful approach to what you're doing. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because you have a fairly impressive running portfolio. So you just finished the Love Run Philly half marathon, and you have done, I think, 3 half marathons, a full marathon, a 10-mile run, a number of 5Ks.
Yeah.
So starting out your fitness journey, was running kind of your initial go-to for exercise? How did you get into running?
Not at all. Man, look, when I first started my journey, I've been doing this journey a while, right? Just like everybody else, we've all had our struggles, we've all tried things. So it's not like it was the first time I went to the gym, or it's not the first time I walked outside, it's not the first time I jogged, but being real with myself, I just wanted to get a certain amount of steps. That's how I started. I was just like, let me get outside, let me do 2,000 steps a day. That's not a lot, it's less than a mile, right? I can do that. I made it accessible. Walking, not running. And then, like I said, I surrounded myself, I started listening to some audiobooks, some stuff that inspired me, and I don't know, one day I was just in a park, and I was just I just started jogging. And I was a previous smoker too. Not a heavy smoker, not a pack a day guy, but quarter pack a day. I fooled myself because they're Native American spirits, so it's oh, they're organic. Whatever. So I started doing like a little jog, and I was just gassed, like 20 feet, completely gassed. I'm just like, but I did it, right? And that was cool. That was a literal first step, right? It's just doing it. And then it was just like, all right, well, okay, so I did a mile in 23 minutes. Okay, there you go. I did it in 23 minutes. That's my starting point. Can I do it in 22 minutes and 30 seconds? Can I do it in 22 minutes? Can I do it in 20 minutes? Can I do it in 18 minutes? Just kept chipping away at that. And most of it was run walking. I used an interval timer. I would say jog for 15 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. Jog for 15 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. Okay, jog for 20 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. Jog for 30 seconds, walk for 2 minutes. And then I would change it. Eventually it was 1 minute jogging, 1 minute walking. 2 minutes jogging, 1 minute walking. I don't want to fill the podcast with these numbers, but the reason why I'm doing that is to paint the picture. Like, I didn't go from weighing 305 pounds to just all of a sudden running a full marathon. Like, I know that's obvious, but there are intentional and incremental steps where it's just, can I just get to the next milestone that you create that's accessible? And that's how I got there. And then, God, if I told you, like, I cried when I, like, ran under an 11-minute mile. I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I did it. Like, you know what I mean? And then, then it was under 10 minutes. I'm like, I can't believe I don't even remember if I ever ran in my whole life a 10-minute mile, let alone at the age that I was doing it, right? So you whittle it down. Then under 8-minute mile, I'm just like, oh my God. And then each milestone was about me, not me beating some guy who can do, it's amazing. I love what these marathon runners can do. But it was just about me just taking that next step and celebrating every win. It felt so good. Until, I joined the running group. Oh, I'm nervous. I got the anxiety. They're all going to be faster than me. All those thoughts creep in naturally when you try anything new. But when you get to certain milestones, you start developing such a powerful strength for yourself in terms of mental fortitude. You're willing to try new things. That led me into the running group. They're like, you should run the Princeton half. I'm like, let me do a 5K first. Did the 5K, did the 5-miler, did the Princeton half, the most hilliest half. By the way, hurt my foot 3 days before the race on accident, not even during my training. Like, something stupid. Like, I was like sitting down, moved my foot a certain way, heard a crick, had a huge bruise on my left foot. I'm like, I am not missing this half. Put 2 compression socks over my foot, ran the whole thing, did it just over 2 hours. Super proud of myself. Foot was destroyed, but super proud of myself. And then I'm like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And then that led me to the United Airlines half in March, led me to my first marathon in April last year. It was probably pretty stupid to run 3 races of this magnitude back to back. I did the 10-mile race right after that, so every month I had a race in 3 different cities. But I've still been training ever since then, and then now I have this half that I just did, getting back into running races again because I just want to take some time, let the foot go from too much distance. So I've still been keeping up my cardio, my strength training, and now it's just on to the next thing. Did the half, got a Spartan, my first Spartan at the end of the month. I just signed up I'm doing some fundraising for Broad Street, so I'm doing Broad Street again. I have an opportunity to run a marathon in September that I'm thinking about in Utah, so we'll see. But like, nothing is off limits for me now, and I can't say anybody can get to this point because we all have our own cards to deal with and we all have our ways to do it. But I just want to reiterate, I've never been a runner. I never thought I'd be a runner. It's just, I was open. I was open to the possibility of new things. And if you're open to the possibility of new things, you'll find your thing. It may not be running. Maybe it's biking. Maybe it's swimming. Maybe it's just strength training. It doesn't matter. But you'll find your thing and you'll connect to that thing, and that'll make things and your journey so much more fulfilling.
I love that. And I love the way that you have broken it down to say, starting out, I wasn't a runner, and you're not expecting to go from nothing to running a marathon right out of the gate. And I think a lot of people miss that because we see these wins and we see these transformations after the fact, and I think a lot of the times we don't appreciate how many small steps and increments we have had to take along the way to get to that point. And I used to be a smoker too, so I can definitely relate to the trying to run initially and being gassed in a few seconds. So it's definitely a process.
For sure.
So you've mentioned you've got...
I know this is a side point and it's completely unrelated, but like, because you were a smoker, when you watch like shows, does it like trigger you like a little bit? Like if you see someone smoking like in a movie, like not like the actual like, oh, it's like it smells and you know it's bad for you, but like just like the social aspect or like, you know, this like that, you know, the habit. It's still
a little bit, yeah. There's a little bit of like, I remember that being nice at some point, but then when the smell of it hits me sometimes, I'm like, like that's not what I remember it being like.
Like it didn't smell like that.
No, it was way better when I was doing it. No, it's terrible for some reason. So you mentioned you have a Spartan race coming up this month in the Broad City race in May. Do you find it easier training when you have a goal like that to work towards? And do you find that it's hard to keep up momentum after you've kind of finished these things and you don't have a concrete goal to work towards on your plate?
The answer was in the question. Yeah, yes and yes. Like, yes, it does. You know, when you have something that you're looking forward to, it certainly makes it better and easier. I'm a collector of medals now. You know, it's fun. It's interesting. I'm nervous, but I'm also excited about the Spartan. And I think like excitement and nerves are the same side of the same coin. It's really just your thoughts around it. It's the same type of energy. It's just what rabbit hole are you going down? Are you going down the rabbit hole of, oh, what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to dead hang for this long? I saw your dead hang video. I'm like, you know, she could dead hang with the best of them. And I'm like, let me get up to those kind of times. So I'm working on stuff like that. I can do plenty of pull-ups, but you know, it's a new challenge. Like it's a new part of my development. So that's what makes it exciting, is somewhat of the variety aspect of it, plus the challenge part, plus just getting better. I want to see what happens, right? I want to see what happens when I do my best. I want to see what happens when I challenge myself to things that other people won't step into or won't try to do. But it's not about other people. It's about, I know I say that, but it's just like, I just never, there were points where I never thought I would be this person, right? And I think that you would probably agree. There are points you never thought you would be the person you are today. So I think it's just interesting that you almost have that perspective of when you're comparing yourself to yourself, your past becomes your comparison, your anchor to reflect on your journey, which can give you courage to step into new things. So yes, the answer is yes. When you don't have a set goal or target, if you've been doing it long enough, you can sustain because you've built the habits, you've made a lifestyle, so you can sustain. But to go to the next level, having something to shoot for certainly helps.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point of even if you don't have like a race or something that you're working towards, making those smaller goals for yourself so you still do have some things to work towards is so helpful to kind of keep the momentum and keep the motivation going with these habits that you're showing up for. And yeah, I would definitely agree. Looking back on maybe who I was several years ago, I never would have imagined that I would be in the position that I am now. All those little changes over time, you don't really appreciate them when you're in the thick of them, but when you take a moment and just reflect on who you used to be and the progress that you've made, it's pretty outstanding.
Yeah, and gratitude plays a huge part in that, right? That gratitude and awareness we talk about, if you take the time to say a few things you're grateful for, and I know it can be challenging when you have lofty goals to say I'm grateful for how I've come, because you really, I guess when you're used to doing hard things and you're so used to it, it's hard to appreciate that I can just get up and do a 40-minute workout just like that. That said, when it's taken away from you, you certainly appreciated it when you could do it. And you hear it all the time when people get injured, they're like, man, it's been 2 weeks since I worked out and I'm really feeling it. So, hey, why wait until that thing happens? Try to just say, I'm grateful. Like, I'm really proud of myself for, it's my third half. I'm proud of myself for doing that. Like, you know, I could have been severely injured and not been able to do it, so I should be really proud that I did it. So sometimes you have to go and create a small image of, like, what if I wasn't able to? And you create that imagery that didn't exist, but that possible pain can trigger the gratitude, which is the flip side of the coin, like, but I was able to. So sometimes I do that sometimes. I know maybe it sounds a little silly, but if you create the image of what could be in the negative, you can use that to be grateful that it's not that way. That you do have your family's health, that you do have your health, that you weren't where you were before. And then that true feeling of gratitude, if you can kickstart your day with that, you can do really, really powerful things.
I think that's so important because, especially in the health and fitness space, I think there is a lot of setting a goal, meeting that goal, and then raising the bar. And we just kind of continuously raise that bar, and we're always chasing that next kind of level up in our progression. And we forget a lot of the times to have that gratitude and to stop and appreciate where we are and what we're actually able to do. And that's always a mindset I try and tap into whenever I go into the gym and I have a workout that's maybe not what I expected. I maybe didn't lift as much weight as I thought I was going to, or it just didn't go as great as I was hoping for. Just stop and take a minute and say, you know what? I still did all of these things that I couldn't do a few years ago. There's still so many wins in there to appreciate.
100%.
So shifting gears a little bit to social media. So you have a pretty impressive brand that you have built, Butterchops, on social media. And you share it's like a ton of really, really helpful information that relates to personal development and health and fitness. How did that platform come to be? What made you want to start sharing information in that way?
The reason I'm laughing so much is because if people go on my platform right now and you just said you share a lot of helpful things, they're going to see me singing with a mustache filter on, like with Arms Wide Open by Creed. And they're going to be like, yeah, he shares a bunch of helpful things. But I do try to take that humor because we take life so seriously and we're so hard on ourselves. And that is exactly why I try to keep things so lighthearted. That's exactly when people like think like, oh, I'm not being humorous for the sake of being humorous. Like smile. If you smile, it does a lot for you, right? And if I can make my community smile, and that's going to help them. So if you come on my page and I make you smile, you're going to take that smile into your next interaction. There's going to be a ripple effect with all the people around you because you smiled for a few seconds at my reel. And then if you take the time to read the caption, sometimes I put little gems in there that relate to what I just posted that might be humorous, but like in the Arms Wide Open one, for example, I put, be open to the gains, like be open-minded. Like, I connect some form of, most of the time, not all the time, but most of it, I would say about 80% of the time, you'll find some gems in those captions that you can use and leverage. So I feel like by leading with humor and keeping things light, it keeps people open-minded. And then if they take the time to read the caption, they're open-minded, they're laughing, they're smiling, and now all of a sudden there's a gem that you can take to learn or to use in that day, so that way you can be a better version of yourself. I didn't answer your question whatsoever. Your question was, how did I get started? The very quick version of that was, my page started as a music page. I've been a musician, which is why I keep trying to pull my musicianship a little bit back into what I'm doing today. But I'm a musician. I fronted bands before as a singer and bassist, guitar. I play drums a little bit. Nothing ever super professionally, but like, tri-state area shows. I've played a few like little small festivals, stuff like that. And then it started as a music page. And I didn't post every day, just sometimes. And then COVID happened. I was posting a lot of covers. And then what happened was I just was so focused and laser focused on my fitness journey, and I was intentional, and I said my North Star is leading with my mental and physical health. As long as I focus on my North Star, which is my mental and physical health, everything else will take care of itself. COVID kind of changed things for me as a musician. I was doing it more like a hobby. I was in a band at the time. I didn't want to get sick. So I left the band. I still co-worked with some musicians online, you know, did some collabs here and there and stuff like that. But then that's when my platform started to change to fitness. And then I said, hey, let's practice consistency. So I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 now, I'm like, I'm going to post every day. So my platform, look, I don't have 200,000 followers. I don't have 1 million followers. There's plenty of other people out there like that. But I'm pretty darn proud of myself, comparing me to me, that I was at 3,000 followers at one point, and before that I was at like 1,000 followers at one point. I committed to posting every single day for almost 2 years now, or maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, whatever. You can fact check me later. And then grew it to around 18,500. I actually grew it to 38,000, but I realized I had like a lot of fake followers, you know, and people that just like followed me, and like, yeah, I kind of cut down all of those fake followers, so I cut it in half, which was heartbreaking at the time. I was just like, am I really going to do this? It was so heartbreaking. But then I did it, and I'm just like, whatever, and I went down to 13,000 followers as a result, and then I built it back up to 18,006. So that's where I'm at today. I'm not hugely concerned if that grows or shrinks. I love my community. They're always coming. They're always commenting. I get a lot of comments, get a lot of likes, and I made a lot of friends.
I love it. And I think you and I have a little bit of a similar trajectory on social media, actually, because I started my account for something kind of different, too. It was only, like, recipes and food initially, and then years down the line, started slowly sharing some of my fitness stuff, and then did the same thing where it was like, okay, let's crack down and be consistent and see what I can make of this. And I did look through your social media in preparation for this show, and so I did notice the music content. And you have a single on Spotify that I listened to.
For better or worse.
It's pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. It's a pretty
Thank
good
you.
single. If anybody listening has the chance, go check out his bio. There is a single on Spotify. But yeah, something I think I've always really appreciated about your content is the fact that you approach it with a lot of humor and authenticity, and you lead with that, and then there is always some amount of education and value being brought into the mix with it. Did you find it hard initially creating content, showing up on social media in such an authentic way, and really bringing your humor and bringing yourself to your content? Was that a process that you had to get used to?
I'm a goofball, so being funny and authentic isn't too challenging for me. That said, it just certainly was an evolution. Like, I am definitely like, at this point, like literally, you know when people say like they don't care? Like, there's very few lines I won't like dabble on, tightrope wise now. Although, like, I still do have a professional presence, so you won't see a lot of cursing. I usually don't use a lot of music that has profanity in it. I'm usually not like crude, like, so, you know what I mean? So there's like a little bit of that, because, you know, I still like I'm maintaining my professionalism in my full-time role. If I didn't have my full-time role, I still probably would be in the exact same like level of boundaries, but I do push. And I don't care how I look. I don't care if I look silly, or I embarrass myself, or there's a role showing. Like, I don't care anymore. And I used to care a lot. And I think, like, when you grow up in a position to where you're seeking attention because you maybe didn't get the validation you wanted, my parents gave me plenty of love, so it wasn't like a parent's thing. But, you know, being overweight, like, I didn't get a lot of female attention, you know, or at least I didn't think I did. My mom played a lot of tricks on me. I found out later that there were several people that had crushes on me, and it was like, there is no way you had a crush on me. Like, I was overweight, and they're like, yeah, but, you know, I had a great sense of humor, a great personality. It's like, I didn't see it. So I was so hard on myself, you know, and bullied myself all the time that I never thought anybody could possibly have a crush on me, right? Never thought anybody liked me. So I think, like, over time, and I think social media helped me a lot with this, was the consistency of posting. And then I just like was over time, I was just like, whatever, kick it off. Whatever, kick it off. And I just kept pushing because I wanted to get better. And I think when you get that mindset of being better, you start to push yourself outside of your comfort zone more and more and more and more. It's probably been like I've probably cared less and less about what I posted, what people think when I posted, and I feel so free because of that. Because there's so much people that like they really care about how they look like, and I guess that it depends. And I should be careful with saying this. It depends on what you want for your brand, because you can be intentional with how you're positioning yourself for your brand. So if you have like a brand you're building and you want to send a certain type of message, yeah, you can be careful with how you present yourself. But I think it's very important that your authenticity, regardless of how you position yourself, shows in what you do, because people connect to you when you are you. And if you're being somebody else, you're missing an opportunity to be you, because there is no you. And people are going to follow you because you're you. If you're someone else, you won't grow. If you're you, you will grow. Because people want that courage of being themselves. And when they see you being you, they're like, I just want to get to that point. And they may not admit it, but they see it.
Yeah, I agree. It's so important to just show up as who you truly are. And you're right, people will resonate with that a whole lot more. And I can certainly attest to the fact, as you've said, that this is kind of a constant process of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. I know I kind of had a similar journey of really having to get used to putting myself out there in such a public way and deciding how I wanted to show up, and constantly just, being willing to try new things and post different things and try different sides of my content, even though it made me wildly anxious and was really far out of my comfort zone. But you get used to it along the way. Like, it gets a little bit easier the more that you show up and the more that you do those things.
Absolutely.
So I guess, reflecting on your whole journey with health and fitness, is there something out of the whole journey that you would say you're most proud of?
I'd love to answer this question quickly. I would say there were a few moments where I made some very, very difficult choices. And it wasn't even the fitness. It was removing myself from some situations and from some people that I knew weren't right, but like having to make a very challenging choice. Like, I had a very long relationship, going on 9-10 years. That's tough when you got to make a choice like that. And by the way, it takes two to tango. Like, regardless of who's doing what in a relationship, like, if you choose to stay, and I know it can be difficult for a lot of people, and it's a very delicate topic, but like, at some point when you become aware that you deserve better, you sometimes have to make that. Once you become aware that that's the key, aware, making that choice can be the most difficult choice, regardless of the type of relationship that you're in, because you become conditioned and comfortable with whatever situation you're in, even when it's bad, even when you know it's bad. You become addicted to the arguments, the fighting, how you're treated, because you start to believe that that's how you should be treated. You're so used to it. So you can get addicted, just like a cigarette, to negative emotions, to negative situations. You continue to repeat the same bad cycles. And it goes both ways. It goes from the person who's doing abusive things to the person who's not doing abusive things. You get used to being abused, and you get abused to abusing, right? So at the end of the day, my situation was more emotional abuse. I became very distant and like detached. She needed the opposite of that. right? She needed more of that, and that made her lash out. And so I wasn't helping her by detaching more. She wasn't helping me either. You have to do your best to find the courage to say, I demand better for myself. And you're helping the other person too, you know, by removing yourself and by not enabling whatever behaviors you're doing to them, where even if you perceive yourself as a victim or not, whether you are a victim or not, and vice versa. So, and that goes for all relationships, you know, whether it's family members, friends that you think are friends, you know, you got to be around and put yourself in situations so where you can succeed. You can still succeed in a bad situation. I did. But you're not doing yourself any favors. So take the chance, make a very difficult choice, but make sure that it's the right choice for you, that you know, you might not know the outcome, but you know that you demand better for yourself. So yeah. I made that choice. That was probably my biggest choice I've ever had to make with, you know, a young child. But, you know, we're all, including my ex, including my son, including me, drastically, we're all in a better place because of it.
That's huge. And I think that's definitely something to be proud of, because it's so hard. I think a lot of the times people, we maybe come to the realization that a certain relationship or a certain situation that we're in is not serving us and it's not the best thing for us. But sometimes the discomfort and the anxiety of leaving that relationship and stepping into the unknown can feel so much worse than just sitting in whatever this dysfunctional relationship is. And so a lot of us don't ever take that step to get out, and we stick with what feels easy. And so what you did was huge and probably had such a profound impact, not just for you, but for her and for your son. And it ends up being so much more beneficial down the road for everybody involved when you listen to your heart and you do what feels right for you.
Well said.
I think you've answered all of my questions. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on? Anything else that you wanted to discuss at all?
I mean, you know, with your mind and the way you view mindset and fitness, I think there's always going to be great topics for you to cover. You're very well spoken. You ask good questions. You're a good interviewer. I know this is your first one, but you're doing a great job. So congratulations. You're better than what you think. And, you know, I would say that we got to leave topics, you know, for you to cover at other times, because we talked about a lot of stuff. But what I would like to ask you is, where do you see your own platform for yourself going in the next 1 to 2 years? Where would you like to be? What is your next goal, and what's your next milestone?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I will say, you're actually helping me accomplish my first kind of next goal. Because in terms of where I wanted to go with this show, having guests on here was kind of that next stepping stone that I wanted to take. Where I hope to go with this over the coming years, right now my focus is, you know, creating valuable content as much as I can and growing this platform in order to help as many people as possible and touch on things that people find valuable. Where I'll go from there, I'm not sure. I have a feeling, though, along the years, more avenues of where I want to take this is going to come to me, because that was kind of what happened with my social media initially. I never got into it with any goal of starting a podcast. At some point, that was never something on my radar early on, and it kind of came to me later on. And so I have a feeling I'll find a similar thing along the journey with this podcast. So yeah, thank you for making my first experience with interviewing someone very easy.
I try. I hope that people heard what she just said, because there's a common thread here, is that she didn't know she was going to start a podcast. I didn't know I was going to be a runner, right? It just starts with a little spark, a little flame, and then you might not see. It's almost like you're driving in the dark and your headlights are in front of you, and you know you're going a certain direction, but you don't always need to know the stuff that's 100 feet ahead of you. You just need to know you're heading the right way. And that just starts with Number 1, caring about yourself. Number 2, demanding better for yourself. Number 3, choosing whatever your North Star is. For me, my mental and physical health. For M, I think it's something very similar, right? So when you do that, you just need to be open to the opportunities that come along the way. And then there's a lot of beauty that can come into your life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you're just willing to lean into continuously growing and bettering yourself and being willing to take those next steps, even if you don't know what it's going to lead to, you will get there eventually. The path will eventually kind of reveal itself to you as you continue to go. And so,
thanks for having me on.
Anytime. If people want to find you, where can they find you? What are your social media handles? What are anything that you want to plug? Will you have the opportunity?
Yeah. I'm at your local grocery store. Just go into the dairy section. There's going to be butter somewhere there, and just pick me up and take me home. But if you want to find me on social media, I'm at Butterchops _. Instagram is really where I play. My next step is maybe I'll try to remember to post on other platforms. I just feel like I'm juggling too many things in that regard. So Instagram, that's the best place to find me. If I decide to really pursue and be consistent on other platforms, then you'll know about it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining the show today. And thank you guys for listening.
Thanks.
If you like the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, or share the show with a friend. Your support allows this show to reach even more amazing people just like you, and it means the absolute world to me. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time at the Mindset Gym.